A design sprint is almost like a roller coaster ride. You put them on, and by the end of it, they want more.
You short circuit weeks, months. You almost can't believe how far along you are after 1 week.
It can be a pretty chaotic process.
Tuesday always sucks.
Always sucks.
You go from the highest highs to we're no good, never work in this town again.
I always love seeing the 8th idea from people because it's when they've just given up.
You just wrote the word sex party.
Stop it! Stop it!
By now, the listeners have just listened to or seen an amazing billboard showing off all the amazing things we're going to say in this episode.
And it's all like, wow, I think that you're totally wrong.
Yeah.
And then we're like, whoa.
What's wild is we don't know what that clip will say yet.
We don't.
But our listeners do. So our listeners know more about what we are about to say in the future than we currently know. And we're the people who are about to say it.
That's crazy. Have you ever seen, what's the one where the aliens speak a language that's in like the present and the future at the same time?
Is this a movie?
The movie. It features a female performer.
An actor.
An actor. And at one point, I don't want to ruin anything, but she makes a phone call to China. No joke. But she doesn't speak Chinese. But guess what? Because she speaks a certain alien language, her future self has a conversation in which a Chinese guy tells her what to say.
Wow.
And she remembers it in the past, and it changes the course of human history. Anyway, welcome to Product Fridays.
Literally what's happening right now. Welcome to Product Fridays. This is probably a good time to mention that we are always experimenting on this show. Honestly, it has been like a 3-month experiment and every episode's a little different. We are trying to be more like a podcast and less like a hyper edited video clip on LinkedIn or YouTube that happens to be 12 to 18 minutes long. So this might be a little bit longer, a little bit more freewheeling than people are accustomed to. And you can tell us if you love it or you hate it. If you love it, great, we'll keep doing it. If you hate it, unfortunately, we'll probably keep doing it because, as it turns out, it takes a lot of time and or money to edit podcasts to be really short and compact. And we are busy boys. We've got a lot going on, but we want to keep doing this podcast. So we're trying to find the lightest weight ways to do that. So thank you for your patience, dear viewers and listeners, while we figure this out.
And I will say, I think part of the reason we're doing this too, Andrew, is because as we move to a more highly produced, rehearsed almost thing, it started feeling like work instead of a fun conversation where we're genuinely surprising each other. It felt like a performance. And listen, I was a theater kid. I get it. I like that stuff. I can hit my marks, but that's not why we started this. So we're going back to our roots.
Yeah. If it were our job and we had to put the work in, I would actually really enjoy my job, but unfortunately we have other jobs. And so we want to keep it about the fun. That also means that we want to talk about stuff that we find fun. And this is what I would like to talk to you about today. How we build products or prototypes of products in short amounts of time. This is a conversation about design sprints, one of which we've just conducted with a client, which I want to talk about, but more specifically, sort of how we've adopted the spirituality of the design sprint and adapted it for our needs.
So can I define what a design sprint is?
Please.
A design sprint, in my opinion, is a time-boxed period where you run at a goal, a problem that you're trying to solve, and you literally make something, however small, to solve it, and then you put that in front of real people and learn something. And there's so many different variations of ways you can unpack that. But I think that's the simplest way to describe it. What do you think?
Yes, and yeah, exactly. It started as like capital D, capital S design sprint, a framework invented by these two guys at Google Ventures that you almost forgot it was ever invented somewhere because it's such a common practice in product and design and tech organizations. And it's this very opinionated framework. It's got to be 5 days, all day, contiguous, butts and seats, can't do it remote. And you've got to follow this very strict process where day one, you're defining the problem, then you're moving into solutioning. And then at the very end on day 5, you've built some kind of a prototype that you're putting in front of users. We don't do it exactly like that. And it's
No.
funny because we've done a bunch of these, and no matter how many times we've done them, we go into each one and like the night before we Google like how to do a design sprint and reread the book. It's called Sprint.
You go out to CVS or Staples and
Yep.
buy Post-it notes. 'Cause you're like,
$100
"Oh."
worth of Post-it notes, even though I bought them for the last one. But in seriousness, like we have gotten a little bit better about this. And I feel like I think actually you helped me kind of get here, Andrew. Once we divorced ourselves from like the framework a little bit and got into more like what's the most helpful for the clients we work with, it started getting better. And we just did one with a client. I can't wait till we can actually talk about this work. We can't yet. 2 weeks ago now. And I thought it was the best one we've done, which was a combination of the people in the group were amazing, genuinely, which is pure luck because often when okay, so here's how it works. Like some company hires the Andrews to come in because they want to develop a concept for a new product of some kind. And we say, okay, great. Our first official act on this project is to get a bunch of people together representing different disciplines, design and editorial, if it's a news organization, and technology, et cetera. And we're going to go through this design sprint, and it's going to be this like really intensive kickoff for what ends up being like a 2, 3, 4 month project.
Right. And people always say, oh my gosh, you're going to make the whole project in a week? Well, you guys are really good. And we say, no, no, no. We are going to use this week to...
No, we're not really good. Let's stop you right there.
We're going to use this week to solve a little tiny bit of the problem that you put in front of us. But guess what? This is going to prime the pump with this team, and it's going to get the ideas flowing, and it's going to get us in the rhythm of creating. So then we can expand that to the whole scope of what you want us to do. But you have to start with this first week, and you have to start with this small problem.
Yes. And in a way, the design sprint is indeed a compressed version of the whole product design and development process in a week. It's just that the output is not, as you said, the entire product. It's like one distilled down specific idea that we think is one of the core hypotheses of the product. So like, let's just get real and help people understand this. So we tend to do this in 4 days, not 5. Day one is often all these people meeting for the first time, or maybe they knew each other, but we're meeting them for the first time. And this is where a lot of the luck comes in, because in a perfect world, we'd have all these relationships and we'd handpick the team. And usually what happens is a client says, can you start next week? I'm going to assemble these people for you. And there's some conversations with them about the kind of people you want, but like you kind of hope that they give you people who are well equipped to do this. And this was the case this time and has often been in the past. They're all smart, brilliant people, but they have not all been through this process before. And so the design sprint like kind of has 2 goals. One is the stated goal, which is we are going to build a prototype in less than a week and test it with people and get feedback. But then the meta goal is like showing a group of people how this process works, which is always, I think, scary to us because we're like, we don't want to be like waste people's time and be bad at this. But it always works out, and it worked out once again this time.
Yeah, most people aren't in the business day-to-day of developing brand new products and don't even have the toolkit to begin thinking about how they might do that. And the design sprint is just like it's almost like a roller coaster ride. You put them on, and by the end of it, they want more. But back to what you were saying, day one of the design sprint that the Andrews adhere to, is all about downloading information about the big problems you're trying to solve from people in the building, and correct me if I'm wrong, starting to figure out what they call how might we of beginning to solve a problem or which problem we want to solve.
Yes. If you had to pick one day to do for the whole sprint, it would be the first day, because besides the icebreakers and everybody getting to know each other, you are becoming obsessed with the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And even if everyone arrives thinking they have a very clearly defined view of the problem that they're here to solve, as soon as people start talking out loud, you realize that everybody's got a slightly different view of either their target audience or the core problem they're trying to solve. And the more time you spend defining that problem and that opportunity, the easier, faster, better the like solution part of things will go. And so that is in this case what we did, right? We like downloaded, this is a media client in this case, right? So we like met with the research team to download everything we could about the audience and looked at competitive products to understand who else is trying to serve this audience. We got into debates about, is it this audience or is it this adjacent audience? And you know, it's like a long day, not just for us facilitating, but for the people in the group, because you're just like downloading data and having debates all day. But the idea is you finish day one with a very clearly defined hypothesis. If we do this, then this will happen. Or how might we, as you said, which is just like a way of rewriting a problem as a question. How might we solve this problem for this group of people? And you kind of like write it on the whiteboard and don't change it. And you come back to that every day so that if we ever stray from the problem we're trying to solve, we can come right back to that big old North Star on the whiteboard.
Totally. And that's the end of the day, right? Like the big problem statement that we all feel excited about trying to solve for this week. And I want us to take 1 inch backwards and describe how we get to getting that big thing on the whiteboard, because it can be a pretty chaotic process. I'm going to use the example that actually comes from the Sprint book from Google Ventures, which is Blue Bottle Coffee hired them to, I don't know, make them a new website or something. And that's a huge, big ask, many things you could spend time on, but they had 1 week to work on one problem. And what they did, and what we do, is they got those Post-it notes that Andrew Phelps bought from CVS, spent $100.
Yep.
And at one point they said, everyone, you know, let's take 5 minutes and let's start writing out like how might we solve little problems in the customer journey of buying coffee from Blue Bottle over the internet. Let's all just take 5 minutes asynchronously in the same room, put on some music, write as many Post-it notes as you can of like, how might we make it easier to choose the country from the coffee you're buying? How might we make it easier to know the different options of the coffee you could buy? How might we get the coffee to your house quicker? And everyone does that. And then what you do is you then kind of have a meeting where you put all those on a big whiteboard together and you start grouping them. And you pretty quickly see patterns come out of it where people had the same ideas, or they're seeing the same problems, or they're seeing like a different angle of the same problem. And typically what we do then, Andrew, is we draw big circles around problems that feel pretty similar. And at least this last time, we had people come up and vote on the problem they are most passionate about solving that week.
Yes. So not only do you build alignment and clarity, but you build buy-in, because everybody on the team feels that they own these problems. They're not just being handed a problem that they don't understand the origin of. They played a hand in defining that problem, which, you know, when we fast forward to Tuesday and beyond, makes the experience work a lot better. So if Monday is about defining the problem, Tuesday is about identifying solutions. And Tuesday, as we'll come to, is always a very difficult, tricky day in the process.
I will say that in our last engagement, I literally wrote a note to our future selves, and I sealed it in an envelope, and I showed everyone the envelope. I'm like, we're going to open this at the end of Tuesday, and you'll understand why. But let's leave that with our podcast audience as well. Tuesday for me is the day of crazy eights.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So Tuesday is about getting all of the ideas out of our head, the good ones and mostly bad ones, putting them on paper, firing the inner editor that tells us this is a dumb idea, this is a bad idea. And it's all about just quantity, like the quantity of ideas, right? And there's sort of a power in groups where when you're generating dozens of ideas in a short amount of time, you start to find the through lines. Tuesday actually usually starts with what I call an inspo share, where everyone shows up with a piece of software or a piece of media, or, you know, something that they're using, loving, finding interesting, finding weird, just to sort of like stimulate that part of your brain that thinks of cool ideas to solve problems. Then we go into Crazy Eights. Okay, so what is Crazy Eights? Quite simply, it is a process wherein everybody is given a very clear prompt for a problem that they have to solve. And we fold up a piece of paper a bunch of times, 8.5 by 11. So it has 8 squares on it, 8 rectangles. And you have 8 minutes to generate 8 ideas. which is actually an insanely short amount of time. It's kind of stressful. That first minute sucks because those muscles are not warmed up yet. You're trying to think of ideas. You don't know what to write. And what happens is when you have this requirement to generate 8 ideas by the deadline, it forces you to just, oh, I got to write something, to just write every dumb thing in your head. And ironically, a lot of those end up becoming the best ideas, but it takes time to figure that out.
I always love seeing the 8th idea from people because it's when they've just given up. Their inner editor is exhausted. He's lying on the ground, run over, and they finally get to let their best ideas come out. Now, I will say, famously, Andrew, we were at another media organization, very august and buttoned up, and I'm doing crazy 8s. And my last idea literally was sex party.
I was just thinking, yeah, you just wrote the word sex party.
And we put it on the screen, and these august editors, I don't know why I did this, were just like, oh, interesting, Andrew. Don't think we would do that. But all that being said is that, you know, if we're using an example here, we might have a problem. How might we? That's something like, how can we help parents better put their kids to sleep or something like that? And, you know, your first ideas are going to be like, we build them a speaker that has soft music. And your last idea is like, we found a religion that's built around sleep and all children are indoctrinated in it. And, you know, listen, between those 2 ideas is probably something that's really, really exciting. So we have these 8 ideas. Everyone else has 8 as well. What happens next?
And then someone, usually you or me, asks everyone to present them. And we're doing some real-time grouping. We start to see the themes, and we kind of write little Post-it notes that are like, oh, these are about community. I'm just making this up, right? And there's a surprising number of similarities or sort of through lines. And I think the reason for that is a good reason, which is because we all spent the previous day talking so much about the problems. And then there's a bit of a debate, a discussion about, well, which of these ideas is interesting enough that we actually want to prototype and test it. And again, the idea may not be the entirety of the product that we intend to build in 4 months, but it may be a core hypothesis that's so curious, or that we're so unsure about, that we want to try to make it and see what happens. And so the end of the day, Tuesday, is making a decision about which thing we want to build. And then what happens next? This comes back to your sealed letter.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. A lot of times we start strong. We have these crazy 8s. People are feeling excited. We often do some voting, again, on like which ideas we like the best. We do all the grouping. We go to lunch. We come back.
Yes.
And then it's kind of like, okay, well, now what? We need to like flesh out this little line drawing that one of us made into a full idea. And sometimes we break off into groups and we kind of attack 2 different ways to come at this. And we say, you develop a line drawing that focuses in this direction from this idea, and you do this other one. And then we all can kind of come back together, and we start to feel Wednesday breathing down our necks. And spoiler, Wednesday is when we have to start building something. And we all start to get a little bit worried because we are seeing the gap between our little line drawings and where we need to be at the end of Wednesday, which is like having something in hand we can show people. And we start to wonder, is this anything at all? And we open up my envelope and we pull it out. And what is drawn on it, Andrew?
Tuesday always sucks.
Always sucks.
And the reason Tuesday sucks is because you go from the highest highs in the morning of anything is possible, we're generating ideas, this is so fun, this is so silly, to we've picked something, and as soon as we started to plan it out, and as you said, build it in a higher fidelity than silly stick figures on paper, the idea suddenly does not seem cool whatsoever. It seems utterly unoriginal and derivative. And what are we even doing here? We're no good, never work in this town again. How could this possibly be the right thing? But we've already committed and we don't have time. So I hope we figure something out. And so I always feel bad because on Tuesdays, people go home feeling like exhausted because it's been 2 full days in a room together, and a little depressed that we haven't actually come up with something fun. But then the sun rises, Wednesday comes, and let me tell you, Wednesday is the best day because it's when we start to turn the plan into the prototype. Can you do, Andrew, like a brief aside on what we mean when we say prototype? Because it can mean a lot of different things.
Totally. So let's not forget, the point of the design sprint is to ultimately build something that either validates or invalidates a hypothesis. How might we solve a problem, a certain way to solve a problem? And that could mean, I guess, that you build an entire app and you have thousands of developers working feverishly around the clock. But in practice, you definitely don't need that. What you need is a simple representation that just gives people enough of an idea of what you're trying to do for them to react effectively. I'm a big Figma guy. That's my design software. Figma has a whole empire built around making little design prototypes where it's like I'm basically in the equivalent of Adobe Photoshop, dragging boxes around, and Figma turns that into like a little screen that looks like a real app, but it's all subterfuge. It's a Potemkin thing. You can't click on anything. But when we put that in front of someone, they're like, oh, I get it. Yeah, this looks like an app. And it doesn't work. The key thing that blows people's mind here is that like we're not trying to build functional software by the end of the week. We're trying to build a representation that allows our testers to imagine the functional software.
Yes, a prototype is the smallest possible expression of a complete idea or a provocation. So, what the smallest possible expression of an idea can be different for different ideas. I have worked in design sprints where the prototype output, in this case, it was a news feed for a news app, was a cardboard cutout of an iPhone and a very tall piece of paper with a bunch of drawings on it. And we would pull the piece of paper up through the cardboard cutout and it looked like somebody scrolling through a feed. And that piece of paper showed all the different types of content that might appear in the feed. That was the smallest possible expression of a complete thought that people could react to and have opinions about. I've done prototypes with you, Andrew, where there's a video heavy concept and you just can't understand what the concept is unless you literally record the video and maybe even put it into actual code, like an actual app with code, because video doesn't always work as well in like design software. So it really can vary quite a bit.
Oh, and by the way, like, we're in the digital space so much, but design sprints can extend to really any discipline. Like, let's imagine that you're working for a call center client and you're trying to imagine a better way to handle a certain kind of call they have come in frequently. And you want to test out like, oh, what happens if we have the call center employees like use this different kind of tonality or something? The prototype might literally be one of your team members like being an actor and getting on the phone with a client or with a customer and following the script that you guys wrote. It's just whatever gets the idea out there so you can get an idea of how people feel about it.
And this is why you don't necessarily need amazing designers or developers who can write apps very quickly to come up with a prototype. Side note, with the advent of AI and a lot of the tools we've talked about before that help make vibe coding easier, it actually is easier to make prototypes like that without having specialized engineering talent, which is great for design sprints because you're turning around things quickly.
Okay, but we're kind of yada-yadaing a little bit from Tuesday sucking at the end of it to Wednesday being amazing. Like, what happens to make that shift?
Well, one, we've had another night's sleep to let all of these problems sink in, and we've developed more ideas. And often we'll break into groups, not always. And that's when you've got focused time to develop more ideas, to put more meat on the bone, and more interesting stuff comes up. You just have more time to make a cool thing.
Yeah, on Wednesday, I feel like there's a lot of individual work. Like, and sometimes in our projects, the rest of the team just like takes the morning off. And me and another designer, or sometimes just me, hacks away at like the best version of the terrible stuff we came up with yesterday that we can. And then people come back to it and they're like, you know what? I see the idea now. I see the potential. I think what gets us out of the jog on Wednesday is, you're right, sleeping. And then B, putting actual pen to paper, pixels to whatever, and then showing people that this can happen. And then by noon, they're back in the game and we are off to the races.
And to your point, one of the things that the design sprint framework is opinionated about, that I think we are opinionated about, is the idea of working alone together. Excuse me.
Yes.
Which is to say, I think when people think of miserable brainstorms, they're like, they groan when they hear that a brainstorm is happening.
Get some water.
I need to get some water or something. They imagine a free-for-all discussion with everyone, shouting ideas over each other and somebody trying to capture them all on the whiteboard, and the loudest voices win, or the most senior people in the room get the most airtime. Those free-form discussions are sometimes valuable, but in the Crazy Eights example, or the idea of the Post-it notes that we come back to and vote on, everybody's getting space to get their own ideas out on paper. They're around their peers, right? But they don't have people yapping over them while they're trying to generate ideas. And that comes up again and again in this process. We need to talk, and then we need to go apart and do stuff, and then we need to come back together and talk. I think that's what makes these successful.
100%. So, by the end of the mid-afternoon of Wednesday, I'm just thinking back to our last engagement. I've usually come back, or our smaller team has come back with, we think this is the prototype. And there's always some edits and there's some tweaks, but by the end of it, we've got something that we can actually put in front of people. I think we should move to Thursday and talk about what that actually means.
Yeah, so Thursday, well, sometimes is racing to finish what we couldn't finish on Wednesday. Yes. That's fine. And then it's building a plan. Okay, who do we want to show this to? What do we want to learn from them? How do we want to design the user interview script, right? It's sort of taking what we made and making a plan for bringing it into the rest of the process. Now, we said we do this in 4 days, not 5. In reality, there is a 5th day that's not always the Friday of that week, but it is the actual work of going and showing this prototype to people and talking. So Thursday is really about finishing that prototype development, making the plan, and the goal is, let's get, say, 6 to 8 humans, real humans, people who don't work in this building, people who don't work in this industry, but like prospective customers, or so we think of this thing, and get their opinions on this thing, because we will learn more in those 6 to 8 conversations than in any deep dive with the research team or any brainstorm we could ever possibly have. It is the single most valuable part of this process, those conversations with real people.
Yeah, and like what this practically looked like the last time is we were fortunate to be working with a client that had like a testing panel that they could draw people from, but they literally set up Zoom interviews with people. And as we began the interviews, I think it was on Friday, we would show up on the Zoom, or our interviewer would. We'd do some opening chatting with this person that's agreed to talk to us, and we literally sent them a link through the Zoom chat, said, please open this up. And go ahead and kind of work through it a little bit. Tell us what you think. And you can instantly tell, it's really frightening, like how happy or how sad someone is about your idea within seconds of putting it on the screen in front of them. And every question you ask after that is super valuable. But it's really as simple as that. It's putting the thing that you created in front of them, having a script that you walk through to guide them through it, and then just let them talk. There's a lot less of me talking. It's more about them talking.
And yes, there is a practice. There's a way of doing this. The idea is not to go in front of a user and say, how much do you like this thing that we made? Okay. But to really kind of divorce yourself from the solution that you made. Because remember, we fall in love with problems, not solutions. And oftentimes the solutions aren't the right solutions. You're trying to understand from the user, like, hey, do you understand what we're going for here?
Do you get this?
Do you get this? Like, is this a problem you have? And is it solving your problem? And often the answer is not quite, but I see what you're going for here. And these are the most satisfying interviews. What if you did this? And then it's like, oh my gosh, oh, I see. And it's not because any individual rando's opinion is so important or valuable, but rather there's something about showing it to people who have not been in it for the week and hearing the way they see something, or seeing the way they see something, that unlocks a bunch of ideas that you just didn't have access to before you talk to the person.
Yeah. And by the way, you record all these things,
yes,
and then you clip them and you put them in the deck that you have with the big execs the next week, because they're going to be asking, hey, what did you guys build last week? And to a T, I think every exec we've shown that to has been blown away by the fact that we talked to real people, that we showed them something. And I want to transition really quickly to talking about what the design sprint short circuits and why that's so good. Because I think there's a tendency with any company to think that, well, okay, building stuff is hard. You have to really spend a lot of time to make sure you're building the right thing. And you can't show anybody anything until it's good, okay? And we all need to make sure that we have all our ideas like in a big room, and we all kind of like write them all on a big whiteboard, and we'll choose the best one from there. I think what the sprint cycle says is, hey, you actually can do this really fast. You have 1 week. Sorry, just make it happen. You have to show real people, because real people will tell you the honest truth about what you're trying to do. You can't wait 6 months later. And trying to have one big group conversation isn't going to work. You need to have this like working alone together moment where you work asynchronously and pull things in, like the post-it notes, like the crazy eights, like the prototyping, to get the best ideas to come up. And that's just not the general practice for like the day-to-day business of most companies.
No, and I had somebody ask me point blank, why do this in a week? And it was funny. I stuttered a bit because I was like, I've never really had to answer that question, even though I so believe it. And it's because if you force everyone to sit in the same room and not do 100 other things for their day job at the same time, and you get everybody focused on the same problem, as you said, you short circuit weeks, months of wasted time of making small advancements here and there. And you almost can't believe how far along you are after 1 week because you're able to get everybody's time focused. There's nothing like focused time, and it makes the rest of the product development process so much better.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So
Yes.
Friday's over. We've given
Yes.
the presentation to the execs. You can't keep the sprint like metabolism going for week after week after week. People do
It's
have to
exhausting.
eventually leave this room. What do we usually do after that?
So the sprint ends. We usually show our advisors, our execs, as you said, a synthesis of what we learned. And we kind of take a breath and say, all right, what are the most important themes that we want to test, to build and test over the next N number of weeks? And I'm a big fan of the rule of threes. It usually ends up being 3 themes. And what I find works, and this is still intense, by the way, is you sort of do these 2-week cycles where you take a week to brainstorm, sketch, design, build, and then you take the next week to show it to customers, and you're immediately getting feedback from them, and then that's informing the following 2-week cycle. And you always go in with a rough plan, and then the plan changes, and it's a little stressful, especially in the middle for some reason, because you're like, oh, we've got so many ideas, and we don't know how we're going to get through them all. How will this possibly cohere at the end of this very short 2-3 month process? But you just keep rolling. And if you stick to that schedule and don't allow yourself the possibility of, well, let's just actually like spend another 2 weeks on this, or let's not test this time around, you actually kind of need those constraints to generate work the fastest. And you need to give yourself permission not to develop every cool idea or every cool feature that you ever might build, because that's not the goal of the discovery process. The product discovery process is not to build a product at the end of the experience, but to validate that a product is worth building by exploring a few big bets or a few hypotheses. And by the way, if at the end of the discovery process, you have 2 big bets that we're excited about after talking to users, and 1 or 2 that we're actually not excited about that we thought we were, that's just as valuable, right? Validating and invalidating hypotheses gives the business more confidence that we should go pursue X and Y, but not Z, with our actual developers and product managers who are going to take the next 6 months to build something.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start wrapping this up, because I think, a lot of times you and I do 3-month engagements, 12 weeks. It always seems to be like roughly around the amount of time we spend up for trying to drill up a prototype for a whole new product. And the first week, we always have the design sprint where we're pulling in a team to help us figure out a very small part of that problem. And then we switch to this 2-week increment that is a little bit more us focused. We don't have people usually with us, 24/7. We keep the people that were on the original sprint as kind of our board of advisors. We're meeting usually daily, and sometimes they're more involved, sometimes they're not. But every 2 weeks, we always have another test where we're talking to customers. That's a really important cadence. And that means over the course of the 12 weeks, we're basically validating like 4 or 5 big ideas. And I hate to say it, I think most great products have like 2 great ideas in them. Like otherwise you're spreading yourself too thin. And our 12 weeks are finding the right 1 to 2 big bets that the company should be making. And that's what we encapsulate at the end of our engagement and hand it over.
That's right. And hopefully we are giving a gift wrapped present to a product team that knows exactly where to go start. And that doesn't mean they don't have to go do some research and do some validation, but we've done a lot of that pre-thinking, and that we think leads to the best products.
Yeah. Okay. So can I plug something? We usually don't do that on this podcast.
Plug away. Can I also just say, I've had to sneeze the entire call.
Okay. Do you want to do it?
Well, and I've been muting myself, but now I feel like I have the chance to do that, and it's not happening. But it could happen at any moment, so I apologize in advance. We don't edit anymore, folks. So
yeah, you're going to hear it. I will say, just so people on the call know, Andrew and I spend probably 1 to 2 hours every day talking on Zoom to each other because that's just the nature of our work. And Andrew, whenever I sneeze, I try to like step away. I try to be respectful. He always makes like a huge like whoa face, like whoa, it was the most loudest noise I've ever heard in my life.
To sneeze loudly.
All right, I guess I am a loud sneezer. The thing that I am plugging, last week, The Atlantic, our alma mater, launched its games platform. They had a crossword before, they had some other stuff too, but they have officially launched a game slate, and I'm proud to say that I was involved in making one of them. It's called Fluxus. It's a word game where you have to basically connect a circuit of words together by matching the first and last letters. Once you play it, you'll get it. Super fun to make. I was involved in prototyping, and boy, there were some rough looking things in the first sprints there. But I never really had made like an end-to-end game like that before. Please go and play it. Tell me what you think about it. Give me your advice for what we should do in the future. I'm hoping to work with them some more. We'll see.
Yeah, you should have let me plug you, because I was very proud of you for that work. Not a project I was involved with. You didn't exactly like know how to make a game before you started that project, or maybe you did, but you didn't have experience doing it professionally. Yeah. And the beauty of this process that we have, this product discovery process, is, as you said, whether it's a call center person or a game for the Atlantic, you kind of can apply the same framework and come up with something great. It's really cool, and the design is very pretty too. I don't know if you were involved in that.
That came later, but it is absolutely gorgeous.
Congratulations. Go play Fluxus, plus the other games that they just announced.
Bracket City, also very good. Should I do our outro, Andrew? Anything you want to say before I do?
I think we should outro.
Okay. Again, this has been Product Fridays, and we never say our names, and we should do it again. Yeah. Andrew McGill.
Andrew Phelps.
And we've really enjoyed doing this. I enjoyed this more freeform style, Andrew, but please, listeners, let us know if you did or didn't. And we'll be iterating as we go through. A reminder that we are doing this bi-weekly during the summer, and we will be doing that for the time being. I don't think I have much else to say except that you should like and subscribe. Oh, nice try, Andrew. On your platform of choice. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we are on Substack. And if you are so moved, we would love it if you would recommend us to someone you think would enjoy hearing our, I don't know, is it wisdom? Who knows? We would love to hear from them, hear from you, hear from anyone.
Well, with that, I think we should say happy Friday.
Happy Friday.